The Dancing with Wisdom podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast with me, Sonora Hager. It's a very special honour to have Mark Greene with us today. Mark, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
So it's Mark, for those of you who don't know, Mark has been the director of an organisation called London Institute of Contemporary Christianity. And this is going to be the first of three conversations that we're going to have about what it means to truly integrate your life and your work. In Dancing with Wisdom, we talk about the four key areas of dancing with wisdom and living with wisdom: being, relating, doing, and leaving. Well, this is very much about doing, the work that we're called to do, the work that I'm uniquely called to do, and that how do I do that in a way that I can flourish, that I can really become all that God intends and calls for me to be. Well, Mark's written a book about that. It's got it here. I've got it here in my hand. Thank God It's Monday, Flourishing in Your Workplace. And it's a fascinating book that really explores and looks at this from so many different angles. But I thought before we look at the book, I wanted to use this time, first of all, in this podcast to get to know Mark. Now, at the back of the book, it's got his bio. Before I read that, I just want to read to you a quote that I quote in Dancing with Wisdom from somebody called L.P. Jacks. L.P. Jacks says, "A master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labour and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he is doing and leaves others to determine whether he's working or playing. To himself, he always appears to be doing both." And that's the inspiration of seeing life as a whole. And I know one of your great passions, Mark, is seeing life as one integrated whole. So let me read you then the bio at the back of his book, and it'll introduce you to Mark, and we're going to unpack that as well. It says, Mark grew up Jewish and joyous in northwest London. In his last month at university, God wooed him into his kingdom, and he went on to work for 10 years in advertising in London and in New York. Gripped by a desire to dig into God's word, he took a career break to study at the London School of Theology. The career break turned into a career change, and he ended up on the staff teaching communication and engaging with contemporary culture and serving as vice principal. He joined the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity in 1999. That was the last century, wasn't it, Mark?
Yeah, it's 1,000 years ago.
A long, long time ago. But eager to focus on the call to see all God's people empowered into their whole lives. That's from Monday to Saturday as well as Sunday. And that's in dynamic and fruitful relationships with Christ. And you've gone on to write a number of different books, and one of which is a book on the life of the Queen, which has sold over 1 million copies.
It has, yeah.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
It is amazing. And even more importantly, Mark is married to Katrina, who's from Finland, and they have three, as he says, splendidly different adult children. He enjoys films and fiction a lot, and does, now get this, a passable imitation of Mr. Bean and a terrible one of Sean Connery. His wife wishes it were the other way around, and his children wish he wouldn't do either of them. Well, that's a great introduction to you, Mark. But let's just kick off, as it were, by just asking you, let's go back to your life story. What was it like growing up Jewish and joyous?
Well, I guess it was joyous. I mean, my father came from an Orthodox family. He actually married out, which was incredibly controversial.
Right. A non-Jew. Yeah.
Non-Jew. My mother was non-Jewish. They were both from Glasgow. She was Celtic Pict.
Yes.
And he was pure, as we've discovered from ancestry DNA, pure European, Eastern European Jew. So,
although you told me you're 21% Middle East.
I am. It turns out that my mother,
yes,
in her family, has got some what was at the time probably Northwest Indian or Afghan blood, 21%. Okay. So Sunil, we're probably blood brothers somewhere.
We're kindred relations.
We're kindred relationship, which explains why she was so very, very dark. Actually, she was remarkably dark. We always thought it was the Celtic in her. And,
living in Glasgow would be very different. Yes, yeah.
But she agreed to bring us up Jewish. So that's how we were brought up. The family was in London.
Yes.
And so I went to Hebrew schools, Sunday school to learn a little bit about Judaism and the history of the...
So were you reading the Old Testament in Hebrew at all?
No, probably not at that point. Most people at that particular stage, well, we could perhaps read, but we couldn't understand.
Yes.
There's quite a number of Orthodox Jews in my family who
Yeah.
could scuttle through the Passover service, for example, which, as you may know, takes place in their home,
Yes.
faster than Lewis Hamilton goes around a racetrack. That very few words would be understood. But there was this tremendous culture, really.
Right. Okay.
The
Sort of
food, the sense of
cultural aspect
family.
of being Jewish, yeah, which I can identify with. There's sort of cultural aspect of being Indian with the food and the family and the noise and the rambunctiousness of everything going
Yeah,
on together like
all
that.
of that.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And so a very happy time basically for you.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was a great time as far as I recall, and I love things like the Friday night. I think
Yeah.
one of the wonderful things about, if you like, Jewish culture is it does do this work of integration. So there is a service in
Yes.
your home on Friday night, and the
Yeah.
mother prays over the candles and the father prays over
Yes.
the bread and the wine, and then
Yes.
if you're in an
So
Orthodox,
there's real family involvement in everything
there's a
together.
family
It's
involvement
very rich. Yes.
from that point of view.
Yes.
And then they have special foods for different festivals and so on and so forth. But I think it's the notion that it's the family. And then,
Yeah.
if you like, at Passover, which, the moment when the Jews celebrate the fact that they were liberated from slavery out of Egypt
Yeah.
by God, that service is a story that's told
Yeah.
round a family dinner table. Maybe the family may
Yes.
be extended on that evening. You may have one or two other people. And, so it's a family occasion again in the home. You
But
may
a
also
really strong sense of identity and belonging, really. Yeah.
very strong from that
That's
point of
amazing.
view. Yeah.
Yes. But then you say, God wooed you to himself in your early 20s. And so it was coming out of that Jewish culture in one sense. How did that happen? And yeah, tell us more about that.
Well, I was being brought up in, Britain, and I was going to schools where, people are, they're praying once a day at the beginning of the day and assemblies and all those sorts of things, as happens in many schools today. And I was kind of always interested in God, but I don't think, what I was finding in, if you like, my home life was, if you like, a real interest in God. There
Right.
was
Yeah.
the culture, and yes, we went to synagogue from time to time. Yes, we celebrated Passover, but it was culturally driven.
Yes.
But I was kind of interested. I don't know particularly
Did you
why.
make the connection that this was a Jewish carpenter?
No, I don't. Probably not at that particular
No.
point. No.
Yeah.
No, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Although
Yeah.
clearly, that's part of the defense for Jewish people. Um, Yeah.
Yes.
So school was interesting that way, and then I went to Israel
Right.
for a
Yes.
year. Spent a year on a kibbutz and absolutely loved that. And then
Yes.
went to university and was planning to do modern languages, but ended up doing Hebrew studies, not for
Wow.
religious reasons. So I was quite immersed.
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
university, loads of people came to talk to me about God,
Wow.
about Jesus.
Yes.
And for 3 years, I'm interested, but I'm not really interested.
No.
It's kind of
It's a nice idea.
it's a good conversation,
Yeah.
and we're having the conversation, and I'm interested in the conversation, but I'm not really thinking, does this apply to my life?
Hmm.
And then in my last year, 4-year course, so quite a lot of my friends had gone. I'd actually got a back injury, and there's some circumstances around this. I'd been going out with a girl for 3 years, and we broke up. I had a lot of time on my hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't play as much sport as I'd been used to, and so on and so forth. And in my last month, in my last year of uni, this guy came to talk to me who was in my year, actually. He was a modern linguist, so he'd also done 4 years. And
Where was this? Where was that?
this was Cambridge.
Cambridge. Right? Yeah.
And he wasn't a debater.
No.
I'd had all the debaters, and somehow it became a real conversation. And one day he was sitting in my room, which was about 50 yards from the synagogue, ironically.
Right.
And he said, well, would you like to accept Jesus into your life as your Lord and Savior? I'm sure it was a completely kosher prayer. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I said yes. But I don't honestly think that it was what you might call an intellectual assent. Did I understand,
What? Yes.
what was going on? Did I understand that I had rebelled against God?
No.
No. Was Jesus the answer? I felt wooed almost. I felt like he was drawing me into himself. It was more like
Yes.
there was a presence in the room.
Yeah. So there wasn't like a great need, a great crisis, or anything like that. It was more, as you said, the word you used is wooed, like a
Yes.
lover is calling
Yes,
their
I mean,
beloved. Yeah.
I mean, you could argue there were some crises. I mean, I'd had this back injury, and I wasn't as fit as I was.
But that created space to think about these things more.
I
Yeah.
think that, often that's the way, isn't it? That there was space to think and space to ponder.
Yes.
But in the end, it was like a wooing. It's almost like a surrender, as in
Yes.
an embrace.
Yes.
I think I understand a bit more now. But that was the moment.
Yes. Oh,
That was
wow.
the moment.
Amazing. Yes. What effect did that have on family, people around you?
Well, I wasn't very, very good at being a young Christian at all. And I remember when I was the 3 years later, I was invited to go and work in New York. And some of my Christian friends were quite worried because New York had a very bad reputation.
Yes.
Babylon on the Hudson,
It
was quite an interesting town in the early 80s. And also, I mean, physically dangerous, but, not known for being the epicenter of morality, if you like.
Yes.
So they were quite worried. And I told my father this, and he said, "Oh, I didn't realize your faith was so important to you." So I'd done a pretty bad job.
So it illustrates you're very culturally Jewish, really, in the sense that it didn't really go that deep. But as a
Well,
family.
no, but the point is, I don't think he necessarily noticed much difference in me. That was my point, rather.
Okay.
But actually, they were quite supportive. To tell the truth, they were
Yes.
quite supportive. I never got any negativity from them at all.
Yeah.
My brother was adopted, Adam, and he had been on kibbutz, and he'd just come back, and he was actually thinking of formally converting to Orthodox Judaism.
Wow.
To Orthodox Judaism.
Yes.
So he was quite upset because he's thinking, I think of converting to Orthodox Judaism, and my brother, who's got some real Jewish blood,
is going another way.
Is going, if you like, the other way.
Yeah.
But actually, in the end, my brother, he also became a Christian a few years later.
He became a follower of Christ as
in
well.
Newport, as it happens. Yeah, he was on a photography course. Yeah.
Fascinating. But so you go off. So it's advertising has been your thing.
Yeah.
It was your thing in London and New York.
Yeah.
What was that about? Tell us what that was like, and things you learnt and ways that you saw God working there. Because, I mean, does God work in advertising?
Well, yes, I think he does.
That's the question. Yeah.
Yes, it's... Yes, I often begin my talks, I used to work in advertising, so you can trust every word you hear from me. For some reason, it still gets a laugh. But I absolutely loved it. I was working for a fantastic company.
And what was it? Yeah, go on. What was it you loved about it? What was it there?
Well, it's a creative industry.
Yes.
The company I was working with had the highest reputation for morality and integrity in the industry because they do surveys about these sorts of things. You may say honor among thieves, but so it was very positive. It's very highly relational, and advertising is creative.
Yes.
And you meet lots of interesting people.
Yeah. God is a creator as well.
Well, indeed.
Yes.
And I think that appealed to me. And what you're often doing in advertising is trying to help people see the benefits of a product or a service in a fresh way.
So did you make a connection at that point in your life between your faith and the work you were doing, or were they quite separate compartments?
They weren't. No, they were quite connected quite early on. Really.
Interesting. And maybe from your Jewish background, do you think that was part of that?
It was part of it. I also think, when I went to New York in particular, I think when I was in England, it was less so. When I went to New York, I kind of met a mentor, really.
Right.
He was a lawyer, and he sort of came alongside me, and he encouraged me, I suppose, in every aspect of my life. And work was obviously a big part of your life. And because I didn't grow up Christian, I didn't think that it wasn't meant to be part of my Christian life.
Right. You weren't. Yes, that's right. You weren't inoculated.
I wasn't inoculated. I hadn't compartmentalized it.
Wonderful.
So, it always seemed natural that, I have to think about this. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right way to behave? Is this the right? Does this kind of communication, is that actually healthy for people? Is it helpful for people? Is it manipulative? Is it not manipulative?
You answer all the right questions there.
And so it was part of it. And I think also sensing that, wherever you are, almost whatever you do, there are people around you.
Yes.
And, how can you encourage them, be, to use the technical language, be a blessing to them?
Yes.
Help them along their way as well.
So if I understand you right, so both of these things started to as it were, grow more and more, both a passion for advertising and a passion for knowing God better through Scripture.
Yes, I mean, passion for advertising, I suppose, what
Yeah, in the
people have
right way,
different,
as a
yeah.
passion for your work. Yeah.
Well, I think the thing about advertising is about communication.
Yes.
So, how can you help people see something that you believe is good
Mm.
in a way that helps them to understand the benefit that it might come from it? So, for example, I'd spent a lot of time working on coffee.
Yes.
And coffee is one of two things to people. It's either, what gets me going in the morning, or it's what they used to call a social facilitator. It's, when you say to somebody, would you like a cup of coffee? You do not mean, would you like some brown liquid that comes from beans that were grown between 3,000 and 6,000 feet and then roasted at 454 degrees Fahrenheit and then ground and then popped in with some water and filtered and then poured in a cup. That is not what you mean.
No.
What you mean is
the social connection.
Social connection.
Yeah.
So coffee is a lot about social connection. So, and it's true.
It's true.
It's how we use it in the culture.
Yes, and it's how we, and that's in a sense what advertising can help with. It sort of frames things around us and gives perspective on things. Yeah. But then you had, was it 10 years, London, New York, advertising, and then you had this hunger to want to know the Bible better and want to know God better. And so you made this pivot and this shift, which would have been quite radical. I would have thought your colleagues would have said, what has happened to this guy? Kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, so I decided 10 years in, and it's interesting how these things happen. Actually, what happened was I was offered the job of new business director at Ogilvy in New York.
Yes.
Which sounds, I can tell by your eyebrows, it sounds
big.
It sounds big. It was a sort of bit of a promotion, but
it was just advertising. It was advertising.
It wasn't that big a job.
Okay.
Sounds like it's very, very senior. It wasn't. It was still a good job, but it wasn't that. And I think it was a catalyst. It made me think, so what do I want to do? I'd got to a certain level and I thought, I've been thinking about going to Bible college for 5 years. Maybe this is the moment.
Yes. And if I don't do it now, I might never do it.
I might never do it. So that was the moment.
Yeah.
And I didn't go because I wanted to become a vicar or a minister or a missionary somewhere. I just went because I was genuinely, been turned on to the Bible, really.
Or a hunger to know God better and what He's calling for your life and knowing Him better, I think, by the sounds of it.
Well, I felt like I was meant to do this, but I don't think, and I found the Bible, God did speak to me through the Bible, but if I'm honest, I don't think I thought, I'll go to Bible college and I'll know God better. I didn't think that.
No.
I think I thought, I'm meant to do this. This is part of my journey with God, and not necessarily that, I'd seen Him do miracles.
Wow, yeah.
Do you
want to share anything from that, or?
Well, I mean, for example, what's a miracle? It's when you cannot explain something and the only explanation is supernatural. So, one afternoon, 3:00 in the afternoon, I'm minding my own business. My boss's PA, Sheila Lieber, comes back from the dentist. She's had her wisdom teeth out. She is in absolute agony and she doesn't know why is she there, but she's in terrible pain. And I said to her, can I pray for you? So she says,
it's a strange thing to say in an office to somebody. Yeah.
So she comes into my office. We close the door, and I pray for her, and the pain completely disappears.
Yes.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Well, go figure. There's another occasion. My boss, one below the big boss, as it were, she fell over on a running track. The X-rays showed splinters, which ran the bone, so it wasn't a clean break. They're going to have to do surgery. And I just prayed that they would disappear.
Wow.
And that they wouldn't have to do the surgery.
Yes.
And for some reason, they took another X-ray.
Yes.
And they were gone. Now, I can't tell you that maybe, why did they take another X-ray? Maybe because they thought there was something wrong with the X-ray. All I know is I was told there were splinters.
And one day they were, one day they weren't.
And they weren't gone. So,
and I suppose but I think, but the conclusion from all that is that God is real, God is living, God is active. He's not somebody just for Sundays. He's somebody who is intimately interested in every area of life and wants to integrate that. And in a sense, that's the journey you've been on, in terms of you came to a place called London School of Theology, and you came as a student, but you actually got a job there, like that.
I did, yes. I mean, they wanted someone to help them with their communications, their marketing, their PR, and they originally offered me a half-time job and gave me some impossible goals to achieve.
Oh, right,
And then they turned it into a full-time job. I didn't necessarily achieve those impossible goals. I just told them, I could do everything right. Communications is, you can't just go, oh, we communicate and everybody's suddenly going to turn up. You know
No,
what I
no,
mean?
no,
It
no.
doesn't
It's
work
only
that.
part of the.
It's only part of the jigsaw, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's only, yeah,
And some of these things take time. But
yeah.
I was so grateful. I felt that was the right step.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it sounds like also that sort of passion developed for you as well about communicating this idea concept might be the wrong word, but this understanding that God is interested in everything, this whole life discipleship and integration, and that's when you then joined London Institute of Contemporary Christianity.
That is correct. I mean, what I realized when I came back from America, having done quite a lot of teaching people, I had to think about their work, if you like, as something that God is interested in. God is interested in all of your life. All of your life counts.
Yes.
What I realized when I came back is it was very, very rare for people to have that integrated view.
Yes.
Now, of course, today...
That's right. God is just there for Sundays, just to label it. He's just there for Sundays. He's not interested in the rest of the week. And it's just my sort of that religious slot. I'm just saying him to bless all that. But the real work, and I think for lots of disciples of Christ, it's the same thing. The real work is what happens on a Sunday or reading the Bible.
Or it's helping the poor.
Yeah, which are all good things.
Overseas mission, or it could be in the home. But it's very rarely what you do day by day. It's very rarely.
Yes. And again, I think it's this idea that I'm trying to find the right word, but this understanding that God is intimately interested in every area of my life, everything I'm doing. And we spend so much time at work.
We do. And I think that's the bigger understanding. The bigger understanding is what you're saying, which is God is interested in every area of our lives because, if you like, he's created us. And I suppose that for me is the key. So what's the picture of God that we have, if you like?
Yes.
And I suppose increasingly I have this sense that, what kind of father is he, if you like?
Yes.
If he was a father, what kind of father would be? And I suppose for many people, God's the kind of father who, for example, supposing you have a 16-year-old daughter, and this father is only interested in how she's doing in her physics, chemistry, and biology because he wants her to be a doctor. Doesn't care that she's a brilliant dancer. Doesn't care that she absolutely loves making korma. She doesn't care about this. It doesn't.
But he's just got it's just a very narrow focus.
That's all that really matters. So she grows up thinking that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
And so her humanity is diminished. Is suppressed. So it's not just that God's interested in our work. He's interested in a sense, all that he's made us to be.
And that's such an exciting and, as it were, exciting and liberating understanding to have. And in a sense, obviously, you're so passionate about it. You've written a book about that. We're going to talk about that in the next podcast. It's called "Thank God It's Monday: Flourishing in Your Workplace." Just a little teaser for people to listen to the next podcast. Why, we're going into a lot more depth in the next podcast, but what's the big idea that you want to get across?
The big idea is
you're in advertising. Advertise it to us. Advertise to us why we should listen to the next podcast.
Well, you either want all of your life to count or you don't want all of your life to count.
Yes.
And if we believe that some bits of our life don't count, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
And I think lots of people don't think what they do every day really counts, has a big purpose.
Yeah.
And that is actually true for people of faith and not of faith.
Yes.
And so what the book tries to do is to show actually not only that God is interested, but why.
Yeah.
Why would he be interested in, a coder? Why would he be interested in a fine artist? Why would he be interested in a mathematician? Why would he be interested in a plumber? Why would he be interested in an electrician? Why would he be interested in a filmmaker? Why is that significant to him, and how does that contribute to his purposes for humankind? So I think when people realize, and that's what the book is trying to say, here's a big purpose, whatever you do.
Yes.
Well, that is now I'm involved in something really significant.
Yes.
I'm involved in working with God to make the world a bit of a better place. Well, what does that look like? Well,
and that's exciting because I can't solve the problems of the world, but I can be a part of that huge jigsaw, if you like, for want of a better word, that he's creating.
I didn't know you couldn't solve the problems of the world, Sunil. You've written a book about wisdom. Surely you're the man.
Well,
I know what you mean.
That's why I called you in, Mark, actually.
Thank you very much. No, it is that. We've all got a part to play in that.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. It's for a fascinating conversation. And thank you for opening up to us about your particular unique life journey as well. And it's exciting for us to learn that God can even use an advertising executive.
Amazing, isn't it? Miracle of miracles, wonder of wonders.
You've been listening to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast, presented by Sunil Raheja. For details on the Dancing with Wisdom book and its accompanying workbook, please visit drsunil.com. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, then please share it, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, and help it grow by leaving a nice review. Life's challenges can diminish, define, or develop you. Which will it be? Make sure you hunger for the wise one. The choice is yours.